nothing away, my beautiful balloon.
All about weather balloons with your Storm Watch 4 weather team.
Meteorologist Brianna Mowry,
Brayden Petrie,
and Chief Meteorologist Chad Merrill. And greetings, welcome to our show on weather balloons. I'm Chief Meteorologist Chad Merrill.
I'm Meteorologist Brianna Mowry.
and I'm Brayden Petrie for Storm Watch.
This is our second half-hour show. If you recall, just last month we gave you a tour of the National Weather Service in Charleston and the only radar in the state. If you missed that segment, feel free to watch it by going to our YouTube page. It's under the weather section. You have to scroll down a little bit. Now, the Chinese spy balloon has gained national attention when it was shot down near South Carolina coast. And ever since then, balloons have garnered national attention. We had the privilege to visit the National Weather Service office in Blacksburg, Virginia recently, observe a weather balloon launch. The data these balloons ingest is crucial to weather forecasting, and they are launched on a daily basis. Now, we want to start by getting the weather balloon prepped, right? We got to prepare the weather balloon to probe the atmosphere. In this video, you will see how the weather balloon gets inflated and just how long it takes. We followed meteorologist Amanda Sava, one of the balloon launchers there at the Blacksburg office. Check it out.
So on this one, that's just how I kind of open up the parachute a little bit, and then you hang that up right here. So the balloon's already attached to the nozzle. It's made out of latex, so generally we try to not touch that part. We really just try to touch this up there. And it's clipped in, and then everything's already open and ready to run. So I'll just press run, and then the hydrogen will start flowing in just a second.
Yeah, they're filling the balloon up with hydrogen right now. You can probably hear it.
It takes about maybe 10-15 minutes. I would put about 900 grams of hydrogen in it on a clear day like this. If it's raining or snowing, we'll put in a little bit more to help it get up past the cloud layers and any freezing levels that might be in that.
When it's fully inflated, how much does it weigh?
So just the balloon itself is about 600 grams, and then like with the parachute and the song, that adds another couple hundred. So in total, accounting for that and the gas, maybe about 1,000, 1,500 grams in total.
Okay.
Going up, yeah. And then put a couple pieces of string too for when we tie it. This one here will go from the parachute to the balloon. And it's about an arm's width of that. And then this just attaches here at the top of the parachute. And I just kind of loop it.
Okay.
I'll wrap it around a couple of times, and then I just like to stretch it out so it doesn't get knotted or anything. And then this next piece of string will go from the parachute to the radio con, and it's about 100 feet. So generally we just walk it out to our little painted dash line out here. That's my bird.
Now, this is in a field just across the street from the Weather Service.
About long enough. And usually if it's really windy, like if the winds are coming from the northwest, we'll kind of walk it upwind a little bit. So, and then when we come back out here with the sonde, we'll tie this end of the string to the sonde, and we'll just put that there.
right, so we just saw Amanda go through the prep process. Now let's see the balloon fully inflated and how much it weighs when combined with the radiosonde, which she mentioned in the story there. That is the instrumentation that is attached to the balloon.
So I am just tying around the base of the balloon using the string that is tied to the parachute. So we do the first couple knots while it's still attached to the inflation system.
How susceptible is this balloon to popping?
It's fairly delicate. Yes, it's made from a pretty thin latex, but it's I don't know. Thankfully, I've never had one pop.
That's good, that's good.
Otherwise, just when it gets far enough up in the atmosphere, when it expands.
Today's solution, I think what's really interesting as the pressure drops as the balloon is sent upward. This will get the size of a small apartment before the words will go.
Okay.
So while it is delicate, it does have some resilience in terms of constructability.
Okay. And what is the minimum requirement for it to go up into the atmosphere? Like how far up does it go?
400 millibars.
Yeah.
Okay, now about how many thousand feet? 30,000. All right, guys, so that was fun watching the initialization process. Is there anything that you learned from that particular?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool how he said, like, when it fully expands, it's the size of a small apartment.
Yeah, when that balloon goes up in the atmosphere, it has to compensate for the lack of pressure, so it actually expands like any air parcel would. So it becomes as big as an apartment up there. That's really hard to believe.
That's huge.
Yeah, very huge. Now that the balloon has been fully inflated with hydrogen and it's ready to go, we have to prepare the radiosonde, which houses the instrumentation that surveys the weather in the atmosphere. Calibration is needed to ensure the instrumentation is reading the temperature, winds, and dew point correctly.
The radiosonde is plugged in right now to the computer, so we just initialize it, and then we'll pull in the ground value, so the pressure at the surface, temperature, dew point, wind, and that gets our baseline. So, and it pulls that data just from the weather instruments that we have out the back and over at the upper air shelter too.
So the Weather Service office is across the street from where they launched the balloon. So we went back into the Weather Service office and we were in front of the computer and she was showing us the calibration there. Now, we all know how technology has evolved over time. Did you see how the difference in size between the radiosonde back in the 90s and the radiosonde today? The computers have become smaller over time, and check out how the radiosonde has become smaller over time. So this is a radiosonde from the 90s, which is much larger than the current radiosonde, which she's holding. And you can see here the difference in size is pretty significant. And this is what's being calibrated now in the computer system, and eventually we'll see the output on the screen after the balloon is launched.
Yeah, and it's already starting to pull in some numbers, but once we launch the balloon, we'll actually be able to see it plot on that SQT.
Okay. So we talked about the instrumentation that's housed in the radiosonde, but where can the meteorologist see the data in real time? There are display units in the office that show the fluctuation of atmospheric pressure, temperature in real time. So the computer is getting the information from the sensors, and this is a display unit of the sensors showing the pressure in millibars, which is the standard in the meteorology world. Yep, so that's the pressure, which we all know in meteorology is in millibars. What we convey to the public is, of course, inches of mercury. And there's another sensor there that just displays the temperature. Check it out. Yep, that's it. Displays temperature and relative humidity. So that's the base instrumentation that's actually right outside the office. So that tracks what's going on at the surface. Now, drum roll, Braden. Drum roll, Brady. Time now. This is the most exciting part, watching the balloon take off. So there's multiple steps that lead up to this point: filling the balloon with hydrogen, attaching the radiosonde that probes the atmosphere for weather observations. We've calibrated the radiosonde, make sure it's secured onto the balloon. So here's the moment that we've all been waiting for. The balloon takes flight. Check it out. Yep, there she is walking up towards the center here. This was captivating, wasn't it?
It was very captivating.
Now, I understand that you did a balloon launch once in college, right?
I did a couple in college, and we didn't have as much of equipment to inflate it. We didn't have a table, so there were 4 of us holding the balloon around to keep it from floating away.
Yeah, and she said that in times of windy weather, they have to have multiple people out there to keep the balloon from going crazy. But this is the actual balloon launch. It was a gorgeous day that we went. It was sunny. We couldn't have asked for a better day to go out there because you could spot the balloon for quite some time before it disappeared into the atmosphere. If there were lots of low clouds, it would have disappeared pretty quickly, but we had deep blue skies, so we could watch the balloon go for kind of forever and ever.
Got a perfect day.
It was a perfect day. Yeah, the winds were pretty light too, so the balloon wasn't blowing around too much. Now, in order to keep a paper trail of the success or failure of each balloon launch, you know, some don't go as planned, and they do this twice a day. They launch the weather balloons. The meteorologist must make note of certain items, log it, and here's Amanda with more.
We've done through the year, the date, time of the sounding or of the launch, how much gas we put in it, and who launches it, and then these other columns we will fill in after the launch is complete, and it tells us the ascension rates at certain levels, so from the surface to about 400 millibars, and then 400 millibars to when the balloon burst. We keep track of the reason the flight ended, so the ones that you see here is the balloon burst, and then how high it got in feet, and then how high it got in millibars.
Okay.
So we'll make a new one of these sheets for every month. So that's why there's only a couple of them in here. And then if there was ever a faulty sonde or any failed flight, we also have to log those in some of these other papers down here that just describe the reason why the flight failed and things like that.
Okay.
So, which thankfully doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while it will.
And what about during severe weather? Do you launch if there's severe weather over the Weather Service office between your interval of time that you have to send the balloon up?
No, if there's thunder or lightning in the area, we don't launch. Luckily, we do have an hour and a half to launch it. So if it's right at the beginning of the launch window, we'll just wait until the storms have passed, and then if we can get it up before the storms come, then we will do that. But we're unable to launch during thunderstorms.
Is there a specific wind gust threshold that you can't launch in?
So no.
I know they've launched, especially out west, when winds are very strong. And what we can do instead of that long string you saw is we can put a train regulator on it. So instead of the entire string having to go up before the radiosonde does, it actually will slowly fall down as the train regulator allows the string to drop farther.
Okay. You know, in that log, they mentioned that the goal was for the balloon to go up to 400 millibars, which we know is about, 30,000 feet in the atmosphere. We need to sample it, the entire atmosphere, to get an idea of what's going on, because the weather above can really affect the weather below. And of course, this information is pushed to a digital platform and sent to the Eastern Regional headquarters. The data that you write down in this notebook here, is that translated to digital?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
We do have an online version of this form that
Gotcha.
At the end of the month, once we inputted all these, that will eventually get sent up to Eastern Region headquarters.
Okay, gotcha. Now, after the balloon is launched, the meteorologist can view the data on the computer back inside the office. That was pretty cool. Check it out.
Kind of what it's at currently, the raw data coming in, and then it just plots it. Some of the variables here that you can click on and off. I'll usually put dew point and humidity on that too. So it's just another way of looking at it too. But I can leave it up on the SCUT. And then once it gets to 400 millibars, it'll ding, and then we can send the freezing level over. And then when it gets to 70 millibars, we'll send a couple other files over to our systems, and then that also goes over to NCEP. And then when it's done, it'll send a notification, and usually that's in about an hour and a half, 2 hours if it's a really long flight.
Now, do you guys remember how long it took to build that sounding?
I think she said it probably took a couple hours.
Yeah. So you know what I did? I took the data that we had from the camera shot and put it into a 15-second time lapse to show you how the sounding is built as the weather balloon goes up in the atmosphere. This is a really cool time lapse. Check it out. You can see the lines on there. One's the temperature and one's the dew point as it goes up into the atmosphere. And that is the sounding data that we see to help forecast the weather. And we learned how much this data is used and when this is used. As a matter of fact, we mentioned the sounding data, and we say sounding, that's the temperature and dew point profile as well as the winds through the atmosphere. The sounding data is available for public use. In this video right here, what you see is meteorologists get a count of the state of the atmosphere. This is the Storm Prediction Center site, and each dot that you see represents where the sounding is being launched. So the Weather Service in Charleston doesn't, but we do have the Weather Service in Blacksburg. We have Weather Service in Sterling, Virginia, several in the central and western parts of the U.S., and that is the final data that people see online. Now, occasionally, you can see the raw data as well. Special soundings are launched if severe weather is forecast or there's a tropical system heading for the East Coast. And in this particular example, we had one launched at 10Z. This is the coast of Florida. I think this was ahead of Tropical Storm Brett because they wanted to get an idea of what the atmosphere was like. So occasionally they do have these special 18Z or midday launches. And what I really found cool was you can go back since 1995 when the Weather Service in Blacksburg started to do the sampling of the atmosphere. You can get the historical averages for precipitable water, CAPE, and all this really cool weather geek stuff, I guess I should say. So there's a lot of climatology involved too. And that helps us forecast the weather as well. So those dots and all that information helps us. And they need the window of severe weather. If there is severe weather or tropical system is heading their way, then of course they have all the atmospheric parameters that we need to forecast. Now, as we come back here, we had a really good time, and after the dirty work was completed, meteorologist Amanda Sava answered a few of the questions of the basics of the weather balloon launch. We're joined with Amanda Sava with the National Weather Service in Blacksburg, and we just had the balloon launch, and I just want to ask you a couple questions about that. First of all, how much does the actual balloon weigh?
The balloon itself weighs about 600 grams or so.
And how long does it take to fill up the balloon?
The whole inflation process is about 10 to 15 minutes long, a little bit longer for adding more hydrogen in.
And now you do the balloon launches usually twice a day, and there's a certain window in which you have to launch.
Yes,
Can you tell us
correct.
what the window is in the morning and the evening?
Yep, so the morning soundings are the 12Z, which is 8 a.m. during daylight savings time. So we have an hour before that time to half an hour after. So the total launch window is about an hour and a half. So we can launch as early as 7 a.m. And then in the evening, during daylight savings time, we can launch as early as 7 p.m. And then during standard time, it's an hour earlier.
Okay. Do you do any special balloon launches if there's significant weather expected in the region?
Yes. So especially when there's tropical systems coming, we'll get requests from the National Hurricane Center, and we'll do extra launches for that, or we can get requests from the Storm Prediction Center as well, and then we'll also do extra balloon launches for that as well. And they'll let us know what times they want and how many more per day.
And how many folks does it take to launch the balloon, or does that depend on what the weather conditions are in terms of the winds?
Usually it just takes about one person, but if it is really windy, sometimes we will ask an additional person to help us to just hold the radio sonde or hold the balloon. But if staffing doesn't allow for that, then we'll have, during really windy conditions, we can use what's called a train regulator. So like Phil was saying earlier, instead of the really long string,
Right.
It is all just wound up on one. So when you launch it, it kind of unrolls itself.
The process from start to finish when you go out there to launch the balloon to finishing the process of the balloon actually going up in the air, how long does that take?
Usually about 30 to 40 minutes, including walking back in, baselining the sonde, and then walking back out there to launching it.
And how long does it take to get all the data back?
So all the data back, once the flight is around an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours. So since we launched around 7:15ish, the flight should be over by a little after 9, maybe around 9:30, and then by the time to see the data in the Storm Prediction Center website, not too much longer after that.
Okay. Yep, she mentioned the Storm Prediction Center. We all use that site
Every day.
to assess the atmosphere. Now, after the radiosonde collects the data through the atmosphere, how is it used? The Weather Service actually launches the weather balloon twice per day, and if requested, a midday launch is necessary. And you might be wondering, with all the weather extremes that we see, what has been the most challenging launch for Amanda at the Blacksburg office? How many soundings are launched across the country each day?
Each day there's about around 80 offices, I believe, that launch the weather balloons. So not every single Weather Service office does it, but there's about 80 balloons per day that go up.
And this information is used in the forecast models, correct?
Yes, so all the data from the upper air launches will be ingested into the 12Z runs for the flight that we did this morning, and then into the 0Z runs for the one in the evening.
Okay. So since you've been here, what is the most difficult situation that you've run into for a weather balloon launch?
Let's see, the most difficult, So it was within the first month that I started working here. So it was the winter storm that we got. I believe it was January 16th or 17th or around that time period. And it was really snowy and really, really windy. So at that point, I wasn't fully certified to launch the balloon on my own. So I had to have someone come out and help me. But the winds were incredibly strong that day. Gusts were over 30 miles an hour. So and it was really cold too. So that made tying the balloon off much more difficult.
You've heard the expression, what goes up must come down, right? Well, the balloons survey the atmosphere and eventually come back down. But where do they go? Amanda answers our question.
Do these weather balloons eventually end up back on the surface?
Yes, so once they pop, they will fall, and then I'm not sure if I'll be able to show you right now, but we can track where it goes to, and we can see where it lands. I think the furthest balloon the furthest of one of my balloons has gone into the eastern counties of like Halifax and Charlotte, I think out that way. So if you have really strong upper level winds, it can really travel.
Have you ever had folks call the Weather Service to indicate that the weather balloon fell in their neighborhood?
Yes, we have had a couple folks call and let us know that they've had balloons fall in their yard. And generally, if that does happen, you can just keep it. So we don't recycle them anymore. Since it's hard to kind of recalibrate them now, since they're so much more delicate than the ones before.
And where do you get the supply? Where does the Weather Service get the supplies from for the balloons? Since you have to launch at least 2 per day, you have to have a constant supply of hydrogen and everything. So where does that come from?
So our office, we have a focal point of the upper air program, and they will order all the supplies from what's the name of
The National Logistics Support Center.
the National Logistics Support Center.
Okay.
And then they have all the balloons and the string that we saw, the parachutes, and the radiosondes all come from them. And then the hydrogen we order from a contractor.
Okay.
And with all this material released into the atmosphere every day from many National Weather Service offices, you might be asking yourself if this material the balloons is made out of is safe for the environment. Phil Heisel, Warning Coordination Meteorologist, answers that question for us.
The balloon is incredibly biodegradable, so as soon as it falls, it immediately starts to decompose, so it's not a threat to wildlife or anything in the environment.
Okay, very good. Now, we've guided you through the process of the weather balloon launch from start to finish and give you a first-hand look at how technology has changed the radiosonde to perform the same function. It's now smaller in size. You may be wondering if technology will replace how we sample the atmosphere in the future. I sat down with Phil Heisel from the Weather Service in Blacksburg to get his thoughts on how the future of weather data collection will happen. Check it out.
Yeah, so with regard to weather balloons and drones, there's nothing that I've seen in the near future where we would move away from weather balloons to collect data from the upper atmosphere. I think the way that those balloons are launched are changing. We're seeing auto launchers at some sites in Alaska where machines will inflate the balloons and automatically attach the radio sondes and parachutes and launch them automatically. I also know that I think the future in terms of sampling the upper levels of the atmosphere is a lot of research is being focused on instruments on weather satellites and sampling that information from above the Earth's surface down to the ground.
Is that also gaining popularity, having aircraft sensor data imported into the models?
Yeah, and that source of data has been used for several years, if not decades, with the instruments on the planes. That information is also getting into the weather models.
Okay, that's very good. I know the drones are right now being used for storm surveying, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Only a couple of weather service offices are using it. I think we really rely on local officials like emergency managers or fire and rescue departments to collect that data for us. But yes, certainly drones are being used to collect that information.
All right, we'll be right back right after this break. All right, welcome back to our show on the weather balloon launch that we had at the Weather Service in Blacksburg.
Yes, so John, I have a question for you. 2/3 of the National Weather Services participate in a balloon launch, about 80 offices in total. Do you see that expanding as we go in time?
Actually, I don't, because when I talked to Phil on the phone, he indicated that they want to do more remote sensing observations from satellites. And it appears they want to make the balloon process more automated. I don't think they're going to add more balloon sites. And the cost, he said, was out of this world to do balloon launches. So I don't see that happening in the future. But what did you learn, or what was your most exciting part of the trip?
The most interesting part of the trip was Phil walked us through how they issue severe weather warnings and watches, and that's a process I've never seen before. And they go in there and they manually draw those polygons, which I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
And so it was just a really cool process to see and be a part of.
Yeah. What about you, Braden?
I thought it was pretty cool how when they make a forecast, they can blend several different models into one forecast map and show it to the public.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So what they do with their digital display is they have access to all the models, and they can input a certain percentage of each model into the temperature and the precipitation forecast.
Snowfall maps.
Yeah, and they can do it in lickety-split seconds. So that's very interesting. And of course, all this information that we're talking about is collected with the weather balloons. It has to sense the atmosphere and probe the atmosphere. It was just very interesting to see how the entire process happens. And, you know, maybe one of these days we'll be able to see an 18Z balloon launch during a special severe weather segment, or if there's a tropical system heading for the country. Those would be interesting to see as well. We were there early in the morning, by the way. So anyways, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you learned a lot, and you can feel free to email us if you have any questions. And we hope you have a wonderful day.